much for attending the last session of today's conference. A big thank you to the organizers, of course. During this session, we're going to discuss about sustainable mobility and decarbonization in Europe, a subject that I'm pretty sure interests the majority of the people in this room. We have so many updates, both on policy and on law. So I'm going to start with a brief overview of the themes of this session and then a bit the structure for you to prepare and have any questions for our speakers today. So among the themes that we're going to discuss, of course, will be the objectives set by the Green Deal by 2050 for the decarbonization and the reduction of greenhouse gases by 90%. Additionally to that, other themes that we are going to explore today will be the electric cars, the use of alternative fuels, and how they can address the objectives set by the European Green Deal, the milestone initiative by the European Commission. More to this, we are going to discuss more and explore opportunities and challenges that the industry stakeholders, policymakers, and lawmakers, they have seen and they haven't addressed so far. Additionally, we're going to see the progress on the deployment of infrastructure, on investment, and also as well any methods outlined in policy packages by the European Commission, namely the urban mobility framework, but not only that, the revision of the EU ETS system, the internal combustion engines, and also how we can create a separate scheme for the road transport to see how we can move towards climate neutrality. To this regard, following this, we are going to have a speech by Mr. Daniel Mays, which is member of the Cabinet of Franz Timmermans, Commissioner for the Green Deal. Then we're going to move forward with the rest of our panel with Andreas Boschen, the Head of Department for SINEA, with Mr. William Todds, representative of the Transport and Environment Campaign Group, with Mr. John Cooper, representing Fuels Europe, and with Ms. Raluca Marian, the Director of the International Road Transport Union. Mr. Daniel Mays, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, and yeah, the mic is working, which is helpful. No, thanks a lot for inviting me, and I would actually like to start a bit with addressing the current situation that we're in, because I am, for one, very pleased that we can be here and have an open panel discussion, and a discussion that's inclusive, that has views from the different parts of the aisle. In the panel, there will be people who will disagree with some of what I'm going to say, but that is freedom and democracy at work, and just a few hours of flight away, people are literally fighting and dying for that freedom. So for me, this is important that we do it, and that this open debate is here, and that we have it. The people in Ukrainian, the Ukrainians, tremendously courageous. They need all of our solidarity and support. And it comes also from the transport sector, parts of the transport sector, all of them actually, if you think of it, are exactly doing that, from train companies who are transporting refugees for free, from the border to safe places in Europe, the road freight sector that is bringing humanitarian supplies into Ukraine, a lot to be grateful for, also to the transport sector. But when you think of this and the freedom that we can now express all here, you realize that actually that freedom being jeopardized at the continent, the price that we're paying for this war situation and the freedom fights that we're seeing. Because part of the price that we're paying are the price that we're paying for fossil fuels coming from the Ukraine. We are actually funding the war machine that Putin is unleashing on the Ukraine. Every day we're sending every day before the crisis we send billions of euros in fossil fuel subsidies and that as fossil fuel purchases to Russia, and that is absolutely something that we need to address. And that's exactly where sustainable transport comes in. Decarbonizing transport is no longer just only a climate policy, an environmental policy, an economic policy. It has become a security policy, a part of security in Europe. The shift to renewable energy and carbon-free transport isn't something, in our view, from the Commission, that you slow down because there is a security crisis. That is, in our view, a false contradiction. In fact, our aim to repower Europe, which is a name that we put to the European Council just a few weeks ago, and to cut our reliance on Russian fossil fuels and fossil fuels from other parts of the world, is part of the commitment to return security and peace to Europe. It's part of our drive for freedom. It is freedom policy. And to the Commission, in the field of transport, sustainable transport, that means three things. We need the Fit for 55 package more than ever. We need to speed up the mobility transition that this package entails, so we actually need to speed it up. And of course, in the spirit of democracy, we need to support and the dialogue with the sector and our citizens to make this transition, which is formidable, fair and just. So let me start with Fit for 55. Together, looking at gas, where we started from, in terms of our policy towards Russia, our Fit for 55 proposals, as we put them on the table, would already enable us to reduce our gas demand by almost a quarter. And we're now making similar calculations, what our package entails for reducing our consumption of oil. With the EU Green Deal, we have the power to turn that upside down, and we have a plan to repower Europe, to break that dependency. And you can make that very concrete. A car that you charge with a solar panel on your rooftop doesn't come at the price of funding a war machine or funding somebody who uses energy as a weapon against us. There's no economic monopoly in using wind energy to produce electricity for road transport and e-fuels for aviation and shipping. Every kilowatt hour of electricity and energy that we produce from sun, wind, water, other renewables is 1 kilowatt hour less dependence from Russia. So if we want true security, if we want real freedom in Europe, and I believe that many people also in this room want that, then we must stop bankrolling Russia and other oligarchs with money for fossil fuels. We need 55. We need that ambitious deal in Parliament and Council on the CO2 standards for cars, on refuel aviation, on fuel maritime, all the other proposals. This is a project that helps to bring security back to Europe. So that is a call on the Parliament and the Council. And then moving on to the transition that we actually need to accelerate. Our plan to repower Europe, as we banded it when we went to the European Council, so the European leaders. Even at the highest speed possible, renewables will not be able to cover immediately all of our energy needs, including in transport. So we must be realistic in that sense. Part of cutting our dependence is also, at the start, diversifying our energy sources so that we get it from elsewhere. And part of that is also using the energy in a more smarter way, and solidarity in purchasing energy between the member states. All of that is part of what we need to do in order to counter this situation. But we must, of course, remain rational. We must keep our eye on the ball that whatever we do in terms of diversifying, it is immediately tied to our plans to accelerate the shift to renewables, the energy that we really need to bring freedom to Europe. So rationality is one, and we often hear that the transition, and that is true, of course, Fit 55 and all the proposals that we've made come with a cost. It's a cost of the transition, and that's undeniable. But compare that to the cost that we have been paying every time we fix a crisis with temporary relief. Compare that to the cost that we've been paying if you don't tackle climate action. The comparison with that, the non-cost of acting is enormous, and that makes this investment really worthwhile if we're rational in doing it. That means for the transport sector that in the Commission's view, now is really the time that each part of the transport sector has a decarbonization strategy. That strategy, decarbonization strategy, is a freedom strategy for each part of the transport sector. It makes you less dependent on things that you don't want to be dependent of. And we have different tools in our toolbox to make that realistic. Because whatever we do, it must be workable, of course. It starts with the recovery money, Next Generation EU, these billions of euros, hundreds of billions of euros even, in recovery money that's now already being put to use in projects that are getting off the ground pretty quickly. The biggest beneficiary of our recovery funds, by far, is the transport sector. And that is something to build on, also when we talk about this bigger transition. And if we go further, some of it is on the discussion now in the Commission, some of it is at the start of the table. Solar energy, if you look at that, it has huge potential in Europe. It allows millions of Europeans to produce their own electricity. Solar rooftops on homes, production plants, businesses, farms could cover almost a quarter of Europe's electricity consumption. And with our upcoming solar roof initiative, we want to create a true value chain in Europe for solar energy. And why don't we immediately extend that to chargers for cars, for bikes, so that we can offer an integrated solution in every home and in every commercial building to have clean transport go together with the solar roof tops that we're promoting under this initiative. Similarly, we want to double down on our ambition for green hydrogen, including even with a green diplomacy initiative to make green hydrogen affordable for all countries that will take part, all European countries. We can extend that to e-fuels for aviation and shipping. So use the same tools that we have on, like the carbon contracts for difference to bridge the gap between the cost of these fuels and other fuels. We can put that good use for aviation and shipping too. So you can draw a line to transport there too. And even sectors that are a bit even more special than others because they're outside of our main climate policy instruments like inland waterways. Even they are now seriously working on a decarbonisation strategy. And just a few days ago, the cabinet of Ms. Valean and me had a conversation with Chris Peters from the European Investment Bank to see how the European Investment Fund can be used to really bring a sectoral roadmap to make inland waterways even cleaner than they are today, truly clean. So even there we are looking. And then there are steps that we can take today. The International Energy Agency has identified 10 of them, and I'm sure that a lot of people has seen them. And it has lots of like these practical steps. Take the bike, walk, take the bus, instead of always taking the car. With many transport options, clean ones, and cities are experiencing, for instance, a biking revolution, with many of these options available, this also becomes convenient to make that choice. This is not a case of a hippie. I would never identify myself as a hippie. This is something that can offer this choice, and we can build on that. Similarly, driving slow with trucks and using combined transport, where you combine the truck and the train, can make a big difference in cutting some of our energy use for energy efficiency. Some of this, if we do that now, we can cement later on with our initiatives on cleaner mobility, which the moderator already mentioned, and multimodal transport, including digital multimodal transport to make combined transport, for instance, more attractive, smart, and intelligent. Now, there's one point before I conclude that I want to make quite strongly too. I started by talking about democracy and an open, inclusive debate. And that commitment to democracy must extend to when we talk about this formidable transition in our transport sector. We need the support of not only the sector, but also the citizens for this big transition. If we don't find solutions for the hugely increased energy prices, especially for vulnerable companies and populations, we will not have the political support to make this big transition. If we don't do this in a fair way, this transition will not happen. So it's completely logical that when we talk about the situation right now, we talk about short-term relief, but I think that this decarbonization roadmap for each transport sector must then come to the table as well, so that we do fixes truly for the long term. We need to work with the sectors for roadmaps that work for them, and we need to see how some of our funds, both in the European Union and the member states, can help in this cause. In Parliament, there's a discussion right now, for instance, on the Innovation Fund, which is a climate fund, a climate innovation fund funded by our receipts from emissions trading, which was also already mentioned. Now we only use that to really for projects that are breakthrough projects. In Parliament, there's now a discussion, whether we can use some of that money for technologies that you can scale up. So technologies that are there, but you just want to scale them up, like clean trucks. And I think we should have that discussion to see how we use the Innovation Fund in the smartest ways possible to help in this transition. Because I think that actually the vision that we can then project to our citizens for their sustainable transport can be a very compelling one, where Europe relies less on the will and whims of one person in the Kremlin, a Europe that is more autonomous, with solar rooftops that can charge your own car, a new business case for a fuel industry to produce e-fuels, a new hydrogen economy, and of course clean urban mobility, where we see more cycling, walking, and public transport. That is my start today. I'm really looking forward to this panel discussion because these are big themes that we're discussing. And I just want to conclude by saying, let's not make the mistake. Let's not make the mistake of putting the climate crisis against the security crisis. Let's not make the mistake in saying the Green Deal is opposite to what we want to achieve with security. Climate policy and the Green Deal is now about cutting our reliance on fuels that we don't want to be reliant upon anymore. It is part and parcel of Europe's security policy. And that's a start, because if we don't see that now, we really are in trouble in building a European continent that is safe and prosperous for us and the next generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mais. Thank you very much for this intervention, demonstrating exactly the current geopolitical risks that we are facing, the tools that the European Commission has available for decision-making, all the efforts for international cooperation, and the interoperability between several policy areas that actually they highlight the importance of the Green Deal and the energy autonomy of the EU. Exactly in this kind of situation right now that we are all following. We have discussed it also today. Of course, all the initiatives under the Green Deal, they will always take form under the appropriate management of programs. This is the pulse of all the EU initiatives and programs, how they are implemented and how they become available for member states to apply. And to this regard, I would like to invite for introductory remarks Mr. Andreas Boschen, the Head of Department for Sustainable Networks and Investment of SINEA Agency. Mr. Andreas.
Thank you. It's good to be here and to be present with so many colleagues and stakeholders. Let me follow up on what Daniel just has opened. We are the Executive Agency for Climate, Infrastructure and the Environment, and we are very much implementing the Green Deal with our program and project management. We are having 58 billion euro to spend over these financial perspective. This is a lot of money, and my responsibilities in the area of sustainable mobility and sustainable infrastructure for transport and energy. And again, we have a lot of money. We have 23 billion from the previous period and 26 billion euro in this period, which basically, if you look at the triggering effect, this means roughly 100 billion euro. And we want to build a sustainable infrastructure network in Europe, and we need this. The needs of the sector, of the infrastructure sector across modes are huge. They are estimated at 50 billion euros per year. So our money is a drop in, a bit more than a drop in the ocean. It's some drops in the ocean, but like Daniel was underlying, we need all workers, all actors coming together. What are we doing with the money? How are we achieving sustainable mobility, sustainable infrastructure? We are supporting more than 1,000 transport projects right now. And let me give you per mode a couple of indications. Road, so modal shift. This is also in the sustainable and smart mobility strategy highlight. We have to shift freight and passenger transport to the rail, and therefore 70% of our investments go into the rail sector. And we are really building and supporting big investments like the Brenner Base Tunnel, like Lyon-Turin, like Rail Baltica, and there are many more in the cohesion countries and elsewhere where we are really establishing a new high-speed network, a new quality network for passenger and freight rail. Road, it is mainly about alternative fuel infrastructure. We are supporting more than 22,000, difficult figure, 22,000 charging stations across Europe, the road network. It's mainly our TEN-T road network, allowing electric cars, mainly because most of these charging points will be for electric cars, to have their smooth journey across borders on the road network and not be afraid of where is my next charging station. We are also supporting maritime ports, maritime transport, short sea shipping. We are also supporting inland waterways. For example, Seine-Escaut is another project linking Paris, Île-de-France with via the Seine and the Schelde, the Escaut River, to the seaports of Antwerp and Rotterdam, and get again modal shift, not any longer using the trucks, but using inland waterways on this area. And last but not least, when it comes to aviation, we are doing a lot about air traffic management, because our skies are less integrated and are less organized than you might think about. And we need a single European sky where flights are more efficient and becoming much more greener. Daniel, you also mentioned digitalization. I think again, it's a twin revolution. It is sustainability and digitalization. So we need also a smart management of transport infrastructure and mobility. And a lot of our measures are going into traffic management, ITS, ERTMS. I don't want to overload you with jargon, but we are investing a lot also in digitalization of the transport industry. We are doing this together. We have really a partnership approach with member states, with beneficiaries, with research and innovation. Again, how can we bring innovation quicker to the market? Hydrogen and all these things also Daniel touched upon. It's good to research, it's good to have innovation, but how can we roll it out as quickly as possible? So and then also I would like to say we are working in coordination and in cooperation with other funds. The structural funds have a lot of money. The regions, the member states in Europe are investing a lot. The EIB, Daniel mentioned, they are also investing heavily in transport infrastructure, and the different national plans under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Daniel, I looked it up, 73 billion euro is the money, the price tag which will come from these plans as far as approved by the Commission into the sustainable mobility over the next years. This is really a very big amount. So to summarize two messages, we need sustainable infrastructure to get to sustainable mobility, and we need to invest massively, heavily in the infrastructure, and EU programs like mine, Connecting Europe Facility, like many others, are there to help, to partner with you to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your intervention. Moving on, of course, we mentioned the current situation that takes place between Ukraine and Russia, the war that is actually in progress, and we have seen how much this had showed challenges for the transport industry, both for the energy dependency of the EU, but also for disruptions in supply, not only in energy products, in materials. To this regard, I would like to invite for introductory remarks Mr. William Todds from the Transport and Environment Campaign Group.
Thank you so much. Thanks, and great to be here again, and wonderful to be here in person after such a long time. So yesterday I was at an action to support Ukraine and to protest against the war. It was an action at Schuman, and there were two young people that came from Ukraine. They fled Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. They went to Warsaw, where they now have an apartment, and they took the bus to Brussels to come and protest. And they were there together with Avaz, which is a campaign group, an online petition platform, and they had gathered 1 million signatures. And their call on Europe was, and they said that much more eloquently than I can do it, but they said, we need to stop Putin's oil. We need to stop Putin's oil, because it is this money that we're sending to Putin that is allowing him to continue bombard our cities and kill our fathers. So, for me, this whole crisis just underscores the cost of oil, and I agree with what you said there, Daniel. I think it's never more clear. There's a tremendous human cost to the exploration, distribution, and especially consumption, because that's what we do in Europe, the consumption of oil and fossil fuels at a massive scale. To put it in numbers, every day we send 250 million euros to Putin, even though we claim to stand with the Ukrainians. Over the course of a year, that is 100 billion euros. This is simply not acceptable, and I really profoundly hope that by the end of this week, heads of state will have agreed to action to do something about that transfer of money to buy oil from Russia. It is, of course, not sufficient to diversify oil supplies. It is going to be necessary if we stop buying oil from the Russians. Just like if you diversify gas, you need we can't change everything from one day to the next. But going from Russian oil to Saudi oil is not exactly a massive improvement. It's a slight improvement given the current situation, but it's not exactly the improvement we're looking for. Maybe some of you heard about the mass executions in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago. Anyways, what we need to do is we need to structurally and completely reduce our dependence on imported oil. Since we don't produce any oil, we just need to get rid of oil. That's the bottom line. And I hate to break it to you, that's not what we're doing, because we have a very good long-term plan, the Green Deal, Fit for 55, 2030, 2035. But the reality is that as we exit COVID, that actually transport is picking up like crazy. Look at our roads. You know, if you come to Brussels or you go anywhere, you know, go to the airports, they're full again. Oil demand is picking up. So we have a situation of global lack of supply and demand that is picking up. That is a big problem. We need to do something about that. That's why I'm really happy to hear Daniel say that the Commission is now actually going to look at how we can deal with the oil situation, how we can also reduce our demand for oil. And I think there's two ways we need to look at this. On the one hand, in the short term, if we talk about weeks and months, short-term demand, you need to look at demand. And fortunately, in the transport sector is not hyper efficient. People sit in cars with, on average, 1.5 person. Trucks are not always fully loaded. Last time I checked, it was 50%. So there is a lot of potential for efficiency improvements in the transport sector. Short-term, car-free days would be great if the Commission could call cities together and get this organized, because currently people are ridiculing this idea, but it's not a ridiculous idea. It's actually what we need to do in the current context. Second, we need to complement our long-term plan with a near-term plan for the next 3 years. And there's a lot we can do in the next 3 years to cut our oil demand. And I would think in particular about electrification. There's a proposal in Parliament, Jan Huytema has proposed to increase the demands on car makers to supply EVs into the EU market considerably by 2025. I think this situation confirms that this is the right approach. Secondly, we shouldn't just look at the number of electric vehicles. We should look at where we deploy them. Somebody having an electric car as a second car, using it once a week, twice a week, that is not as good as somebody using a company car on a daily basis. We need to focus electrification where it has the biggest impact, and that is in the high mileage segments of the market. That's company cars, that's fleets, that's it's taxi fleets, buses, vans. That's where we need to prioritize in the next 3 years. And then I'll say one final thing about what we shouldn't do. I've seen with great astonishment that over the last couple of weeks, the farm lobby and the biofuels industry has been saying that this crisis confirms that we need to have more biofuels. Well, I don't know if you probably know, but there's also a food crisis because Ukraine and Russia are major producers of food, major exporters of food. In that context, this is going to kill people in the Middle East, in Africa. In that context, you cannot burn more food. You should actually be suspending your policies where you turn perfectly good wheat into ethanol to then burn it in cars. So what I would say is, agreeing very much with the long-term plan, but urging the Commission to make sure that electricity, less demand for oil, more efficiency, and then e-fuels, hydrogen for aviation and shipping. Let's not wait until 2030. It needs to happen now. Thank you.
Thank you, William. So indeed, if we could number the consequences that we now see in Europe from the current energy crisis and the war that happens in the eastern border of Europe, including Ukraine, in this sense, is true. And this type of crisis show exactly the need for a diversification of our energy supplies, but as well to see how we can use renewable and attainable fuels. To this regard, in this session is so important because actually we have representatives from the industry as well, important stakeholders, that with their insights and perspectives, they can give us a bit more of an overview of how we can shape our policies and what is the feedback brought from those sectors. To this regard, I would like to invite John and have a discussion about the strategy regarding all the renewables that we have available and how to make them sustainable. What proposals does the industry bring? John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So just a word, Fuels Europe is the association, it's a business association, and the members are actually all the fuel refiners in Europe. The major names that you'll no doubt know, Shell, BP, Total, Repsol, Eni, actually 40 companies. And of course, you may well think of those as brands in the fuel stations that you'll see. They're also actually major investors in a lot of different renewable technologies, including wind and solar, many hydrogen projects, projects with carbon capture and storage. One of the key members of the Battery Alliance is one of our members. So they are very significant investors in delivering the Green Deal, actually. But let's just take stock where we are today. Almost everything that moves in Europe is powered with our products, with the important exceptions, of course, of electric rail and the growing number of electric cars on the road. And we've been very clear with our members. You know, we've come out publicly and we've supported the Green Deal. It's absolutely the right thing that we must do. And we've been very clear that that means for our industry a trajectory for the use of petroleum fuels in Europe that goes towards zero. And we've together worked through what does that mean. And we all understand that that actually means that there's a huge role for electrification of everything that can be electrified, because we have to recognize that whereas 100 years ago we thought petroleum was a great gift, and it has been in delivering a lot of development of society across the world, now we need to see wind and solar as the great gifts of renewable energy, and we maximize their use. But there are also some limits and some practical challenges there, and we now realize also that hydrogen will play a major strategy, molecular energy is key, and also liquid fuels of different forms. There will be some role for them. And we have set out in our association to explore and to define what we can do, and now what we believe what we should do in developing renewable liquid fuels. And interesting, there are several points of agreement actually that I've noted already in the comments from Daniel and also from William here, that clearly aviation and maritime will need liquid fuels. And actually our strategy sees very much the long-term destination that we can deliver everything that aviation and maritime needs in a renewable form. Where we see a point of difference is that we also believe that there's a role for some of these fuels in some road transport. And we think it makes an important contribution to go there as well. We see some risks to delivery if we have an electrification-only strategy in Europe. I mean, to quote an article from the Financial Times earlier this week, just since the crisis in Ukraine has kicked off, the metals costs for an electric vehicle have already risen by $7,000 per vehicle. And whereas we have had real concerns about dependency on oil in Europe, there are 60 countries in the world that provide oil, whereas the materials we need for the energy transition typically come from a far smaller number of countries. Look, we absolutely must do electrification, but we are simply saying we also need a wider range of technologies. We also think that if we only have an electrification strategy, there are some social friction risks as well. The cars are simply more expensive, and that gap seems to be widening. And if we look at what car makers are doing, they're removing the lowest cost cars from their range, and the cost of the cars are going up. Already, half of Europe can't afford a new car. And so if we go through with this strategy, it seems to indicate for a while we'll have an us and them situation. Those that have the electric car and receive the many benefits of doing that, and those that will be locked out for some time. We supply millions of customers every day with fuels. Many of our customers turn up with a car that's second, third, fourth hand, may only be worth €1,000. Those customers will not have access to an electric car for some time. We're saying we really do need a strategy for liquids to do this as well. One thing that you said, William, that I thought was a really important thing and a development in some of your positioning on this is that instead of just thinking about cars, we think about how you get the best out of the electric vehicles that go on the market. It makes a great deal of sense to have the subsidies that we're putting in place to go into a vehicle that is used 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day rather than 1 hour a day. And so actually vans, buses, short-term delivery vehicles arguably deliver a better focus for electrification. And plug-in hybrids with renewable fuels could be a solution for other sectors. I'll leave it there. I'm sure there's lots of questions to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. It has been, yes, a very useful insight on the current debates as well, and shows how EU through crisis, it can move forward, how we can evolve, but also how to learn from our past experience, but also from our previous methods, and how we can move forward with new ways and new solutions proposed from all stakeholders implicated. To this regard, I would like to invite our next speaker, Ms. Raluca Marian. She's the Director of the EU Advocacy and General Delegate of the International Road Transport Union. And it will be very useful for us to have a discussion with you about the building blocks or the swift of decarbonization in the road transport, how we deal with the access and the availability that we have in alternative fuels, broad infrastructure, but also cars that they can sustain the new alternative fuels. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina, and good afternoon, everybody. International Road Transport Union stands for the road transport operators or commercial road transport operators. So we are the voice of the trucks on the road. We heard about trucks already today, and also buses, coaches, and taxis. So collective means of mobility. I think the advantage of being, sorry I cannot look at everybody and see everybody. The advantage of being at the end of the panel is that basically most of your job has been done. So now I can just capitalize a little bit on what my panel colleagues have already said. So there is something very good which I can pick up from what everybody said. So from Daniel, for example, definitely we fully agree that decarbonization is key. And I would say also that decarbonization of commercial road transport is absolutely a must. Also because, coming back also to what Alexandra was saying about where to focus our resources and investments, if we look at goods transport, we represent 70% on the goods transport inland. So 70% is trucks. So even if we shift a big percentage to rail, we have seen over decades that this shift won't be material. And we hope to see this shift because there is also a very substantial increase in demand, which is being foreseen. I think the Commission's figures are 60% by 2050. So quite a lot of increase in demand of goods transport. So definitely we need rail. We are the first ones to see. So combined transport, yes, please. But 30%, no, 70% investment in rail, some investment in, coming back now to something good you said, some investment in inland waterways, and a little bit of investment in rail may not be the right equation, let's say, in order to achieve decarbonization of the 70% of inland transport. So a bit more money for road transport would be very much welcome and necessary. Then coming to what William is saying, definitely electrification is one of the ways forward, a very necessary way forward. As transport operators, we need options. And we also look, even now, with the technologies we have today, at the various segments and the best technologies for the various segments of the market. And fully agreed, for urban transport and regional transport, so short distance transport, we already have enough mature electric technology, so more uptake of this technology and support for the uptake is very much welcome. Long distance transport, heavy duty vehicles, 40 tons truck or 75 tons truck in the north, well, there is still a way to go there, but will electricity come? Yes, most likely it will come there too. Will it be everything? We don't believe that. So we are looking at options. And if we look at options, we look at hydrogen as well, but why not? Also, coming back to what John says, biofuels. In the end, we want carbon neutrality. If we get carbon neutrality, who cares how we decarbonize? Should it be tailpipe or not? Carbon neutrality and the best use for the best segment is what we are looking at. And now building blocks. You mentioned the building blocks. So we are looking at the decarbonization, let's say, goal. And definitely we need legislative intervention. If the market is just left alone, it will be very difficult. So Fit for 55 can be an opportunity. And the first part of the building block, and that's part of it is in Fit for 55, is the availability at the same time, so in synchronicity of three main elements. One element is availability of vehicles in sufficient numbers. Second element, availability of infrastructure for alternative fuel vehicles. And the third one is availability of fuels. And by fuels, we also mean electricity in the grid. So availability of fuels and electricity. That's the first building block. Once all of these are available, then we look at how to intensify and how to incentivize our sector, so road transport sector, to decarbonize. And again, looking at Fit for 55, we see energy taxation and we see ETS, which could be also opportunities for the road transport sector. But unfortunately, at least in our view, not in the form that they were submitted to the Parliament. So unless these are a little bit amended, and just to give you some examples, for us, one of the, again, commercial road transport, and in particular heavy-duty vehicles, 7 million of them on the roads. What is very important is right timing. So increase of the cost base could be a good measure to push the sector to embrace something else, but it has to come at the right time. And 2025 is definitely way too early, or even earlier. If we look at energy taxation, 2023, ETS, now we see a proposal from the rapporteur 2024. So these are dates which are obviously, when we look at ASEA, and we hear that they forecast 70,000 electric trucks being placed in circulation in 2025, compared to the 7 million heavy-duty vehicles. So the figures are just not matching to substantiate such a massive increase in such a short time. So the right timing is key. And also, right, or let's say intelligent taxation, as opposed to the multiple taxation, because now we see carbon being taxed pretty much everywhere on a national level, various names to various taxes, ETS national, but also various other taxes. How can we do it in an intelligent way? It can be the ETS, it can be something else, but it must be intelligent taxation and not penalizing the sector because it's too early and we do not have other options to embrace, or let's say in a chaotic way, we just adds on taxes in a manner which is not optimal for everyone. So that's...
Thank you so much, Raluca. This kind of perspective is really what makes valuable panels like this. We hear different ideas, different opinions, different perspectives. We also have the official response and perspectives from the policy and lawmakers. So it's very important to hear a speech like this. To this regard, I would like to ask the audience to prepare any questions, exactly because this is almost one of the first times that we start having in-person meetings instead of virtual ones. I would like to give the first question to the audience, so you can take a couple of minutes. I will do my best to try to track all questions with my side vision. Can't guarantee 100% results, but I'm going to give my best. To this regard, I would like to invite our virtual audience to also send questions. This is an amazing opportunity to ask anything to a broad variety of participants, so don't miss it. With Raluca, we close the round of introductory remarks. So to this point, I would like just to present myself. I'm Christina Kouremenou, I'm Senior Consultant for de Havilland Information Monitoring Services. As part of the daily work of our EU team is indeed to monitor transport updates. And what I have seen from this panel is that we have made the right choice to always grasp not only transport policies, but see how interlinked they are with other policies, such as energy, financial matters, trade, transport, mitigation of risks. So it's very, very important to see exactly the interlink between all the policies and the facts that our speakers they have brought today. To this regard, I would like to open the floor for questions from our audience. So is there any volunteer? Yes. Microphones to the gentleman. May I kindly ask you to state name, surname, and the affiliation that you have, please? And also the person that you would like to address your question, except if it goes to our whole panel.
Okay, Steve Phillips, Conference of European Directors of Roads. I guess in a way it's a way to the whole panel, although I think Raluca probably will hopefully agree with me. I recently attended a presentation, and Norwegian Road Administration basically said in their carbon strategy, long-distance road freight, forget it, because it's not going to make any difference. So it was kind of leave it alone because they were focusing in different areas. The question of logistics was mentioned earlier on, and we regularly hear quotes about 50% of the carbon footprint of things delivered to your home. 50% of that actually is what we call the last mile. Often it's the transport from the supermarket. So we have very inefficient last mile deliveries. Again, if we look at the European Commission's own statistics and we look at a fairly small percentage, it's less than 20% of all of the CO2 actually comes from long-distance transport. So, going back to the question we heard from the Commission, in terms of the investment that is going into the different areas, and the modal shift, which we've been crying out for years as well, where are we actually going to get the biggest bang from the buck? Because actually, again, focusing on long-distance freight transport is not addressing the major decarbonisation issues. A lot of it is in the last mile. And that's where I was appreciating William's comments where we talk about prioritisation, because many of the supermarkets themselves, for examples, are saying, look, if we go to e-commerce and we deliver it to your front doorstep, okay, but then we save a lot of the carbon in that respect. But on the other hand, and this goes back, I guess, to Danielle, we also have the social dimension, because we also have to reflect that there is also a huge driver crisis. And many of the jobs, the training, the availability of the drivers is also affecting this sector, which is why we're also seeing a shift to smaller vans, which is, we talked about congestion earlier on, which is clogging up our cities. So my question is how do we address all of these complex issues? How do we keep the people on board and really identify where are the main carbon issues that we need to bring about in Europe, which is not, Raluca, it's not your members.
Who would like to respond to our first question from our panelists?
Since my name was mentioned, I think it is my members as well. I think it is a lot of my members for both segments that you mentioned. First of all, if we look at AFIR, so Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation, because AFI is a different question, and we see it also in the TEN-T proposals, so Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation, we see actually a missed opportunity in the fact that there is no more emphasis on electric infrastructure on urban nodes. So, and that's for both segments. So there are some provisions on infrastructure for heavy-duty trucks, and there is nothing on light commercial vehicles. Or talking about prioritization and what William was saying, that's a missed opportunity, because not there you have a segment where electrification can take place, and not everybody will have the means either to charge at depot because they can build this infrastructure with their own money, or at shippers because hopefully shippers will invest in this infrastructure and they will be able to charge there. So if this is not promoted also by policy, that's a missed opportunity. And on the heavy-duty trucks, as I already said, we need options. So we don't know. I mean, the progress, there is so much investment also in batteries. Definitely for us is not only electricity. It's electricity, hydrogen, and biofuels and renewable fuels. So 3 options. But why would we exclude electricity? And if the signal now from politicians is a wrong signal, so if we see a dilution in AFIR from the council, pushing the deadlines for heavy-duty infrastructure to 2030 and beyond, then this will not happen, because we won't buy a truck if we don't have an infrastructure. The 70,000 trucks mentioned by ASEA, heavy-duty trucks, why would we buy them if we don't have where to charge them?
Thank you very much, Raluca. I would like to give the speech to William.
Thank you.
Robert.
I do agree it's partially your members, actually, because it's true. It depends on your definition of long haul, I guess, but it's true that only 20% of the road freight emissions come from trucks that do 1,000+ kilometers per day. But the vast part of the market, the vast part of the emissions comes from trucks that do 250 to 600 kilometers a day. That's no? Yes.
Look at the EE8 statistics,
Yeah, but I'm talking about trucks. I'm talking about trucks. Within the truck segment, the majority of the emissions comes from 250 to 600 kilometers a day. And that's the part of the market that you can actually decarbonize quite rapidly with, with electricity. That's perfectly doable with a battery electric truck. Perhaps not, not today, but in 2025 certainly. And the key question is supply. We need options for the truck drivers, for the haulage companies. And I think, if you take a step back, what is the challenge that we have in the truck manufacturing sector? This is a sector that has been producing diesel engines for the last 100 years, and they've been doing that very well, and they were very successful. And now they're being asked to transition very rapidly to something very different that is not their core business. They're only going to do that if there is a very strong commitment from governments and regulators to go in that direction. And building the infrastructure is part of that. Creating incentives for haulage companies, but also for the truck makers to go in that direction is also part of it. But you also need to force them so that they all move in the same direction, because these are huge investments, not just in new platforms, in new cab designs, but also in battery manufacturing or in supply chains. So, and that's where I think the proposal that the Commission is making at the end of the year for truck CO2 standards, I think is going to be critical. If we want more supply, more options, the Commission needs to step up.
Thank you, William. Daniel, would you like to respond?
Yeah, because this will allow me to move a bit in the middle between what was said, but then later on you can judge whether I was closer to the one to the other ultimately. But because these are all important points that are being made, and it's good that we devote some attention to road freight, because it's one of the, if not most complicated part of decarbonizing our transport mix. I think that, picking up something that Raluca also said, I think that what our proposals should do, Fit 55, and also the part that comes later, is indeed set the right time horizons and the right targets to have the cleaner trucks really hitting our roads. I really see that as an innovation signal, like a signal like now innovate. And Raluca and the sector has indeed been in the slightly inconvenient position that the first proposals that came out in July 2021 were on the price, the carbon price for road transport, and they had to wait a bit for the follow-on, so the part deux, the part deux, which is really important, which is what William mentioned, the supply of these trucks. Now, I agree with Raluca that if you look at the signals that we're giving to start, indeed with the urban logistics, where indeed innovations are happening, and the market is doing this by themselves. That's not us. It's like it's happening on the ground. It's absolutely right that in the Parliament also we get the proposals that we've made are the correct ones. I totally agree with her that there's scope to discuss whether on the urban nodes, and especially at the edges of the city centers, the targets can be a bit more specific in terms of like charging at depot, for instance, for trucks, where you can even work, if member states believe like, oh God, that is really complicated, you can even work with smart charging there, because they're in the depot, and you can make sure that actually the charge takes right at the right place. I think that's an important discussion to have, because that is in reality where the innovations will start in city logistics. And then moving on to the long haul bit, which is the more complicated part. I agree with Raluca that this is part of the equation. But what we cannot do is say let's have that a free pass entirely, especially because in this sector the lead times to invest are so long. You need to give the right signals now. And our proposal by the end of this year for new CO2 performance standards for new trucks will indeed be crucial, because these will set targets for truck manufacturers to comply with for the entire fleet of new truck sales to become cleaner and produce less emissions. And they need to be ambitious, because that's the only way where these trucks become affordable for the people who need them. I think that the technology race, and William will disagree with me on this, the technology race is a bit more open in trucking. So I'd also take the point of Raluca that this will be a proposal that, well, you have different technologies at play. So I think that we should also really continue the discussion on, like, it's the most complicated sector to come with a decarbonization roadmap, but we need to have that dialogue to make sure that also the demand side and the supply side come together in the right way, so that we know how to target these investments properly. Something that Raluca just mentioned in passing, but which will become important part of the proposal too, because we should not forget about them, are the buses, where we have some serious thinking in the Commission going on when we come with the CO2 performance standards for trucks, to include the buses in there, so that also the bus makers get an incentive to produce more of them. And we actually are having serious discussions to go quite far in that sense. Actually going closer to mandating a proportion of sales that needs to happen, especially in urban logistics, so that these things really come to the market really quickly. And on infrastructure, that's also a long game which we need to get right. The parking spaces where the trucks take their rest drives, their well-deserved rest, need to be the place where we need to have clear targets for charging, so that this becomes convenient for all. And once all of this comes together, starting with the shorter transport and then the longer transport over a slightly longer time horizon, then we can have a talk about the decarbonisation roadmap, I think, once all these ingredients are on the table, because I think that our economy will need it. And we will get support, by the way, from corners that are quite promising also in the current situation, because nobody really talks about that a lot, but a country that really wants to be a leader in electric buses, for instance, is Poland. And they're really keen on that, on building manufacturing capacity. So it's really a way to combine different sources of energy going on. Poland will want to decarbonize, will want to cut reliance on Russian fossil fuels, and will want to build a serious industry and exporting industry on areas like electric buses. So let's work with them to make that happen.
Definitely. John is next,
Okay.
and afterwards...
But it's just a very quick reaction to Daniel, because in the collective passenger transport, buses and coaches are very different. So buses, you see a lot of electric ones already on the road. Coaches, they are behind trucks. So when we talk about the CO2 standards, this has to be kept in mind. In terms of development, not in terms of on the road, technological development.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of like how big vehicles these are, like literally. Yeah.
Thank you both. John.
I was just going to make a quick point that I think you made a good point about value for money, and actually businesses, everyone in business knows that metrics are absolutely key to delivering an objective. And outside of the ETS, where there's a great understanding of cost of carbon and what's covered and what's competitive with the ETS, our observation is that there's actually not a lot in the conversation in Brussels around what is value for money, what is being spent by society on each of these different sectors. We know that transport costs substantially more than industrial sources in terms of decarbonisation, and we think that if there was that better dialogue, it would actually help make the choices as to where you direct public subsidies towards electrification and other technologies.
Thank you, John. Andreas.
This is a good question where to focus on, what needs to be done where immediately. But I think we should think about transport as a system. And we should not say we do last mile, but we do not long haul. We do aviation, but we do not maritime. So I think this is something which transport is getting to think in a more multimodal and mobility as a service spirit. And that is also a game changer. We need modal shift to rail, but of course we will have trucks. Of course. So we are not in competition. The modes are not necessarily in any competition, and everybody, each segment has to contribute. And I would really like to see more this multimodality and this system approach happening in transport, and the different modes and the different actors working together. This is happening. We are certainly all doing our bit to make it happen, but I think this is also a kind of solution, and let's not oppose things which need to be together. That would be my small contribution.
Definitely. Thank you, Andreas.
Maybe?
William.
This is
it's
hard to resist. Two points. One, you said I would disagree on hydrogen also being an option, being an open technology race in the trucking sector. I don't disagree. I do actually agree that the race is not over. In Switzerland, there's Hyundai trucks running around on green hydrogen. That's very good. Let's have more of that, and let's set a zero emission target and let the best technology win. That's what I would say. Second point I would make is on costs. John, you said, I think by the way you're doing an admirable job of portraying the oil industry as a big backer of the Green Deal. You said before that EVs are expensive. I think this is actually not true. EVs are expensive today because they're not produced at the same scale of internal combustion engines. EVs, electric cars, are actually quite simple as a technology, but they're not produced in unit, in tens of millions. They're produced in low volumes. If you bring the volume up, the price is going to come down. And there's been several studies, including by Bloomberg New Energy Finance, that says that for electric cars, by 2025, 2026, the price should come down. Now, of course, if the material cost goes up, that might be later, but that is a question, it is a question of time. Second point on cost, I think you're implying that it would be better to have, one ETS system or one carbon price, and then the market will figure out where you can get the lowest cost carbon reductions.
Didn't say that.
You did not. No, but you always make that point, but you never say what the conclusion is. I think the point is that we need to invest in transport decarbonization right now, even if that costs money, because if we postpone the investment, it's going to be more expensive in the long run. Yeah. So
Okay,
it's not either
cover
or.
the EV cost point, right? I mean, again, quoting Bloomberg just a few days ago, they make the point about Tesla. Tesla is now a global car manufacturer, just opened their 4th factory and producing many, many cars. They're a scale manufacturer. And some of us, or many of us, will remember when the Model 3 was announced with much fanfare, it was going to start at $35,000. The starting price, as according to Bloomberg from 2 days ago, the starting price is now $47,000 for the Model 3. All the other cheaper options have disappeared completely. It is simply not true that the EV is coming down in cost. I've been following this subject for over 10 years. We've been 2 years away from the tipping point every year, but it's a moving target. And actually today, the cost is going up substantially. And car makers, it's well evidenced in the market. Car makers are taking the €10,000 ICE car off the market, which is going to exclude a lot of people from having a newer car. I'm sorry, but you're out of date with that point, William.
I would propose to move to the next question, a final one from our audience, and I would like to give the speech to the European Cyclist Federation that you made the note. But thank you all for your input on this question.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the panel for a very interesting discussion. And you will not agree on everything, and I don't agree on everything, because to my taste, you have been talking a bit too much about what we put into the engines of our vehicles. Oil from different sources, like Saudi instead of Russia, gas, electricity, solar PV, wind perhaps, biofuels, etc. But it's still about what we are putting into the engines. And Andreas was hinting at it, and Daniel all in the beginning as well. I would like to have heard a bit more about the modal shift, about public transport, about shared transport, about active mobility, about intermodality, because that's going to be at least as huge a part of the solution as what energy source we use to make our wheels turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Daniel, would you like to move forward?
Yeah, because this is what I also mentioned in the opening. This is really an area where the short-term actions that people can already do right now, you can really cement that with longer-term actions. Because I think that also looking in my own direct surroundings, there is a lot of discussion on, should I take the bike more than the car for each ride, because the fuel cost is going up as well now. Should I to take the bus more often? And that's things that the International Energy Agency said, like things you can do now, and that's absolutely what we need to cement. And didn't have the time to mention the speech because otherwise it was spoken for ages. But as Henk knows very well, the proposal that we made in December last year are actually really about that, about the modal shift, and they are pretty ambitious, where we've proposed in our Trans-European Transport Network guidelines that all the cities above 100,000 inhabitants need to develop by 2025, so in the next 3 years, going back to short-term actions that William mentioned, a sustainable urban mobility plan, and that the sustainable urban mobility plan, amongst other things, need to do is increase the modal share of cycling, public transport, and then, of course, also the zero-emission logistics, especially at the city centers, so that everything can come together in the right, well, you call it the systematic way, clean trucks at the city edges, and the use of other modes of transport, both for passengers but also for freight. Cargo bikes is booming in certain countries as well. So these proposals go in that direction. That's something that we need to continue on that path. And I think that the mission to have 100 climate neutral cities in Europe by 2030, a climate neutral city mission to me is a city that has this modal shift. So we need to devote the resources to that. But no matter how you turn it, there will be areas, an electric bike can go far and you can go drive many kilometers with it. But there will be areas, rural areas, where cars will remain important. And then I can slightly pick up on this cost point, because I think that on the cost and comparing the combustion engine car with whatever fuel you put in there, an electric car, the comparison needs to be fair. Because if my own father-in-law, who is not a fan of the European Green Deal, and actually he's German and votes mainly for the party that has many complaints about it, he did buy an electric car, and he bought it because he had solar panels on his roof with subsidies, and then he realized I can actually drive for a large extent for free. So the total cost of ownership basis of an electric car is quite big and significant. And I think that integrated solution is something that we need to work on to make sure it's affordable. Leasing probably needs to come in. I think we need to devote more attention to support for leasing arrangements for people, so that the electric car indeed becomes also more affordable for them. So that is important, that you make the right comparison, because also what you hear a lot is people that want to put e-fuels into combustion engines. And then when you look at the price of the e-fuels at the petrol pump, even the next decades, if you really are concerned about the social divide in Europe because of electric car prices, the upfront price, then you should also really be concerned about what you would ask from the average passenger in an e-fuel price at the petrol pump. And I'm not even talking about the fact that you would have to produce 7 times renewable energy from as many wind farms and solar plants as you need in order to produce them for the passenger cars in comparison to what you would need for a better electric car. So also voices in the parliament that say that, these voices I know politically as realistic voices, in the sense of, I want to be realistic, and if you would really want to be realistic, you see that is really not on a cost comparison basis the way to go. It may be different in other areas of transport, but that is clearly something that needs to be put on the table when you talk about this issue. And it's the reason why I think the market is going where it's going. It's the reason why car makers are making the choices in their boardrooms. I'm not making these decisions for them. They're making these decisions themselves. So the momentum for that, I think, is growing, also with Germany taking its new position on the CO2 performance standards for cars, which it did.
Thank you, Daniel. I will just invite our 2 other speakers to provide any comments short, so you can have time to wrap up and say some key messages from this session. So Raluca, you can go next, and then John, and then we move with the key messages for today, okay?
Yes, thank you, Christina. I just wanted to welcome the message which has just been placed, and I think that Daniel actually covered all these other areas which go beyond what the discussion was. The discussion was on the core of the problem. Where do you have to crack it, let's say? But of course, there are other ways to decarbonize, and we represent collective passenger transport, buses, coaches, taxis. So of course, this is one of the also very good tools for decarbonization. Daniel also mentioned the training of drivers. You said truck drivers driving slower. So definitely training of drivers for eco driving. So there are other tools as well, but here we really focused on the core of it.
Great. John?
Sure. So I mean, one of the first things I'd say, cycling. I'm a regular cyclist. I actually think cycling is an underused mode in cities, and I would be delighted to see more safety for cyclists, more dedicated roads in London. Why can't we have more roads that are only for cycling? And also, if we didn't have to turn up in a suit and stuff like that, it would help to turn up in meetings. Intermodal, absolutely. I think we can do more there. But I do have to answer some questions on the cost of fuels. I don't understand why, William, your organisation has turned this conversation only about e-fuels. E-fuels is something that will make sense in the longer term when we can produce huge amounts of renewable electricity from areas, for example, North Africa, where you can put huge photovoltaic installations, but there is not an electricity demand nearby. In that case, the quantity of electricity becomes less of an issue. That's our future resource for hydrogen and a joined-up hydrogen strategy, including taking it to methanol, ammonia, and other liquids. So e-fuels will play a role, and there's a lot of work done that shows that actually the cost there can get very close to the cost of petroleum if you do that longer term. In the medium term, or even shorter term, don't understand why you're completely pushing out the idea of advanced biofuels. We have very significant quantities of waste and residue feedstocks in Europe. Going in that direction will create jobs in rural areas. It creates new income streams. The technologies are there. The feedstocks are already there because they're produced alongside food and feed crops. And so it seems strange to us that you always go to the e-fuels, which is the example that gives you the numbers you need for your headline. Whereas actually, if we had a proper system change cost analysis, we can show that this route is competitive in every way, GHG and cost, compared with electrification for several of the modes, in particular heavy duty and some road transport as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And thank you, I hope you can hear me. And thank you to our audience with their questions that they really launched a very good debate among our speakers. So for the last 3 minutes that we have of this amazing panel for today, I would like to ask our speaker to just mention 3 key messages that they take from this session. I can start first. I would say for sure diversification of energy, always find ways to have energy supply that doesn't let EU to be subject of political manipulation, and building further infrastructure allowing EU to become innovator, pioneer, and also remain competitive in the global sector of infrastructure. Raluca, would you like to mention the key messages that you got from this session?
The key messages that I got, or the key messages that
you would like to share? You're free on that.
Because if we say the key messages that we got, where we all agree,
Yes.
let's do that.
Yes.
We all agree on the urgency of decarbonization. We all agree, even William, yes, on options. Yes, that there should be some options, perhaps not on all options, but that there should be some options. And we all agree on an incentive, or a smart incentive system which can support this transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Raluca. John.
Well, not everybody agreed with everything I've said, but I mean the closing points that I would say is simply that actually our members, our industry, very interested to make, very keen to make more investments in renewables and renewable liquids, along with the other technologies that they're working to bring forward. Slightly baffling that we sometimes have a civil society group arguing against what we're trying to do in renewables. We believe there's great potential there, and we'd like to further the conversation with the Commission to get a joined-up strategy to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, John. William.
Yeah, thank you. So it's hard to resist the temptation to reply to some of the things that have been said here. First, but no, okay, you know, one thing we all agree on, even the oil industry, is that we need to get rid of oil. Zero petroleum, that's the direction of travel. We need to stop making the wrong people rich. So I think that's good that we all agree on that. 2, not everybody agrees on that, but we should avoid false solutions. I think the problem with biofuels, and you're probably talking about biofuels, is that waste and residues are limited. So the idea that we're going to pick up all the straw and pick up all the forest residues and then turn that into, you know, massive quantities of advanced biofuels, I think there's some issues with that proposition. Yes, there's limited quantities, and let's focus them on aviation. We're okay with that, but the idea that you can power significant parts of our massive transport system with straw and forest residues and used cooking oil, sorry, that just doesn't add up. And if yeah, sure, I'm sure you gotta study on that. So, and the alternative to that is that you use food and feed, and I think we can all agree that in the context of a global food crisis, it is not wise to burn vegetable oils and to burn wheat and corn, to burn them in our cars. I don't think that's a good idea. So let's focus on the one thing that we can do at scale and we can do fast in Europe, and that is renewables-based electrification.
Thank you, William. And maybe some key messages from the European Commission. Daniel, Andreas, whoever would like to go.
Okay. I read on the screen future of transport. I think for me it's clear the future transport system has to be more efficient, and the mobility, and I stress the word mobility system of the future, will have less individual cars. I think also in our discussion here, we were still too much on individual cars, and that's not the future of transport. We have to be more mobility as a service and more multimodality, car sharing, micro-mobility, active mobility, whatever it is. We cannot replace our current individual cars by electric individual cars and so on. So I think this is, for me, I got a confirmation from this panel that we have to be less individual car owners.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you to all our speakers today for their contribution. Yes, please, Daniel. I thought it was a message like from the European Commission as a whole.
We are both the,
yes.
at least today, the Commission. No, but I think that what was good from the panel is that when you're talking about the future of transport conference, that there was here at least consensus that we want the transport to be free, in the sense of free of fossil fuels and free of the dependence, so that the future is free for all of us is really good. And for me, what the panel discussion, also the questions from the audience really also showed is the tremendous importance that this transition that we are going to ask from our citizens, let's face it, we're asking that of the citizens, that it's really a fair one, that they have the feeling that they can get along. And I don't want to belabor it now, because now I'm going to talk about my parents, and I talked about my parents-in-law already, but my parents live in a social housing environment, so very different from where my parents-in-law live. But even there, the new social housing project that they're going to move into has solar panels on the roof, and they're now also thinking about via leasing construction to get an electric car to charge it with that. And these type of integrated solutions, that I think is what we need to think of to make sure that we don't just ask this transition from citizens, but that we show to them concretely how it can work. The same also for innovation. For my part, I am really serious about avoiding the result that Raluca mentioned, that you only put a carbon price and don't work on the alternative, the clean alternative that people want to, that you want people to move to. So the innovation is very important, and we're very happy to also work on things like e-fuels in aviation and shipping, because that could be a true global leadership industry for Europe if we get that right. And then building from these small steps that you already mentioned, of course, the multimodal nature is important. More people are already taking to cycling, and public transport will get the support that we need, because that is also part of the freedom of transport.
That's great. It's really great remarks, and we're very happy and honored for all of you to be here as well today. And to this point, I would like to invite and thank actually Forum Europe for the organization of this event, and all of you for being here today in this last session. So I would like to invite on the floor Mr. James Wilmot from Forum Europe.
Okay, so thank you, Christina, and to our panelists. I really enjoyed that session, and much appreciated for everyone here attending in person, and again attending online. So the 300 or so people are also following us online. Thank you all for being with us today. I'm not going to stand in your way much longer when there are drinks and networking conversation to be had. Just generally speaking, to all the speakers who've attended throughout the day, we don't underestimate the amount of time that you put into preparing your interventions. So thank you once again, and to all the sponsors and partners who you can see up here. Thank you for your support, without whom we wouldn't have been able to do this. And finally, as well, to my wonderful colleagues who've worked very hard to bring this conference together, along with the technical team from GSF. Thank you very much. So, Christina, do you plan to say anything?
I would like to thank all participants for here today, and also, of course, to invite you all to our cocktail reception that's going to take place right after this session. Before that, I would like to provide you with a brief speech of what the Haviland EU does, our services, our clients, how our services, they can benefit you, and after that, we can all kick off for, I think, the most relaxed part.
Yeah, okay, so I'll leave that to you then, but yeah, thanks again. I'll hand over to Christina in a second, but yeah, once Christina's finished, we'd like to invite you all up for a drink before you leave. So thank you from Forum Europe, Christina.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, our speakers. You can say, yeah. Thank you. Some last logistics. So I will try to be brief, but also concise. So thank you all so much for remaining here. It's the last hour of the day. I understand that the weather is super sunny in Brussels, so it's the best way to celebrate the end of this very successful conference. Congratulations again to Forum Europe for the organization and the support so far. So what does the Haviland do, and what is that person here says to you? Who is this person, and who is the Haviland, and why do you care? So I'm Christina Kouremenu. I'm the senior consultant of our De Haviland EU team. What we do, I have an experience that crosses across public affairs, communication, and legal services, including specialization on EU legal and policy research. To this regard, in De Haviland, I monitor the services of our team, which expand across financial services, digitalization, environment, energy, transport, health, areas that I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in Brussels, they are currently very active. So, who is the Haviland? For those of you that you might know as yet, the Haviland is the leading provider of political insight and political intelligence, both from EU and from UK. To this way, what we do is that we monitor information and we assist public affairs professionals like yourselves to provide them with tailor-made information about the topics of the areas of their interest. Our information services, they help our clients to conceptualize information, deliver their governmental policy, deliver their government policy strategy, their communication strategy. We always seek to understand the needs of our clients, which, by the way, they include major players in financial services, transport, technology, and digitalization. We're currently based in Brussels and in London, in the heart of two capitals where political affairs play a very major role. Our services, they are designed to help professionals like yourself to influence EU policies and governmental policies as general. So our work is practically to inform your strategy by anticipating change, help to mitigate the risk, make a risk assessment, do some feasibility reports, see how we can support you into planning and how you influence your governmental policy. We are a team of 50, but at the same time, we have policy experts and a commercial team that provides you a 360 overview of services to always make sure that we hear your needs and we translate them into quality services. So just a brief overview of what our services do. So we have a lot of products, but if I could sum them up, let's say in 4 points, it will be one. We have a People's Point, which is a database where we include contact details of staff from the European Commission and the European Parliament, also from the Council. That this allows clients to be able to do some stakeholder mapping and some horizon scanning. To this regard, we also have a legislation tracker to provide a snapshot of the legislation of the EU. We all know how the language and the format of the EU legislation can be, and for someone that is not very skillful to this or very useful to, or very used to it, to be more precise, it's very easy to get confused, but our services actually help you simplify and navigate through the world of EU politics and the tools that they use themselves. Another tool that we have is the forward planning. So we provide to you an overview of all the major events from the European Commission, from the European Parliament, and also of key stakeholders, like the ones that we have heard here today. So you will be able to know what to attend, where to attend, and whom you can send there to speak. Additional service that we offer is reporting, alerting, coverage of European Parliament committees that you might be using on your own practice, member state coverage. We understand that you might be operating both to EU and to UK services, or you might have activities in several member states. We provide report on what member states do, what they transpose in their legal system, and how you could benefit from it for your advocacy strategy and for your governmental policy strategy to this request. Additionally, we provide reports that they are very tailor-made on your needs. They are bespoke and very customer tailor-made, meeting all the requirements that the clients they are setting. But who are those clients that you're hearing me saying so far? We have clients that they are operational in the transport, in the financial services, in energy and technology. Some examples that I can give will be the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, EasyJet, Airbus, Cummins, Continental and Honda, very big names in the EU area with strong advocacy efforts. We are there to assist them and we can assist you as well. So what do? We are here on a transport conference, so you might be requesting, okay, how can the Haviland help me? That I might be focused in fuels, in transport, in maritime, in aviation. We always monitor the legislative and policy updates. We make sure that our clients, they understand the policy changes, how they can comply with the EU ambitious targets. We update all of our clients on different stages of the legislation, including the expansion of the emission trade system. On the road sector, the proposal, as it was mentioned before in our on the conference on the intelligence transport system, the legislation on batteries and waste batteries, these are just examples that we use to better help our clients. We also take always a deep look on the impact of the cross-sector policies to the EU transport industry. Either this is aviation, road, rail, or maritime. Examples can be the European Data Framework, the recently published due diligence requirements, the new EU proposal on strategic autonomy of semiconductors, but not only that, the CO2 emission performance standards that the Commission is currently debating. To this request, we show exactly that we're always on the pulse of the EU politics. We are ready to hear from our clients. We are ready here to meet here and anticipate your needs. And this is something that we really take great pride. I would like to help you all for your attention for today. Me and our business development manager, Carol Kennedy, we're always open for questions for you. Again, once more, I would like to thank Forum Europe for hosting such a great event. We're looking forward to meet you all on the cocktail reception and enjoy the rest of your evening.